Thank you very much for that introduction. Just a quick little bit about myself. I'm a white male. I'm wearing glasses and a black sweater, sitting in my office at the British Columbia Institute of Technology in near Vancouver, Canada. The slide you see is our title slide, and you just heard the title. It's euphemistically called The Story of the Beast, and I'll tell you what that means in a minute. And the picture you see there is myself during the competition in a very strange looking wheelchair with a couple of my engineers beside me. And you mentioned in the intro that I'm a Paralympic athlete in the past anyways. And I just will mention that I was in a car accident well over 30 years ago, became a paraplegic, injured my spinal cord, T4 paraplegic. And ever since, I've been a manual wheelchair user ever since. So that gives you a little bit of background about myself. And here's a little bit of background about where I am. I am on the traditional territories of our Coast Salish nations of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Indigenous nations of Canada, in what we call now Vancouver, Canada. And I live very close to a place on this slide to the left, and I put this up also just to show you how lucky I am about where we live. And it looks like this today. Actually, it's a beautiful sunny day, and on days like this, and I might do it tonight, I will often get on my electric assist adapted hand cycle and go to that park in the middle there that you see. You can see my cursor. It's called Stanley Park. And I mentioned this because it gives you a little bit of background about what I think about life and using a wheelchair and what I try to do. And I want to go to the beach. I want to go to trails, and I want to access the nature and access my community as much as anyone else. And that really drives a lot of the work I do, thinking about innovating wheelchairs and assistive technology. So the agenda today is I'll tell you a little bit more about who we are, my research group, and then about this competition called the Cybathlon, which I call an assistive technology Paralympiad. And then I'll tell you about the events there, our wheelchair race, and how we approached it from a wheelchair design standpoint. And then I'll show you a video of the actual winning race, which will sum up everything I talked about today. So I work at a group called the Make Plus Applied Research Group. Our credo is creative solutions for better lives, which I think also sets the stage, I think, for what we are trying to do with this Cybathlon competition. I'm at the British Columbia Institute of Technology, as I mentioned. And let me just jump right into what the Cybathlon is all about. It's an assistive technology competition. It happens every 4 years. This was the third one that happened in October 2024. It was founded in Zurich, Switzerland, from the ETH University there. And what they do is gather teams from all over the world with people with disabilities on their teams to make innovative assistive technologies, to develop and innovate in ways that impact potentially people's everyday lives, tasks that people with disabilities have to do in their everyday lives, but also to overcome barriers that we all encounter in our everyday lives. And as a wheelchair user, those barriers I think are pretty obvious. They're things like curbs and stairs, obstacles that wheelchairs just normally cannot get over or around. That's what this competition is all about. There was 8 events at this version of the Cybathlon in 2024. I'll just go from left to right, starting at the top. There was a vision assistance race, an arm prosthetic competition, a robot assistance race, which is, think about a power wheelchair with a robot arm attached to it doing different tasks. At the top right, there was a brain computer interface race. In the bottom left, an exoskeleton competition, then a functional electrical stimulation bike race. That's where you stimulate paralyzed muscles with electrodes to move your muscles in patterns, in this case, to operate a bicycle or a tricycle. Then there was a leg prosthetic competition. And then finally, the bottom right was the one we competed in, which was called the wheelchair race. Now, let me tell you about the wheelchair race. What you'll see in this slide is a hockey arena in Zurich, about half the size of Rogers Arena in Vancouver here. And on the floor, you see 4 different columns of apparatus. From the bottom left is where the race starts. And I'm in the bottom right corner or bottom right lane, if you will. And we start on the left and we go all the way through it into 10 different tasks. And those different tasks that we had to overcome would include things like navigating very tight spaces, things that you do every day in a wheelchair. And then things that we don't do every day in a wheelchair, like climbing staircases, which you'll see examples of soon. Another thing we had to do was raising the height up in the wheelchair, which you'll see in a minute, and then traversing different uneven surfaces, and two very interesting tasks, which required us to manipulate objects somehow with a robot arm or in some other fashion. And I should also show this slide because it just gives you an overview of what this event was all about. There was fans in the stands, there was television cameras everywhere. There was announcers talking about, you know, the play-by-play of what was happening. It was very exciting, and I think of it as a cross between a Paralympics competition and a scientific engineering conference. So from my point of view, it was just the perfect, you know, mashup of these two parts of my life. Here's a slide of some of the past competitors in the wheelchair race of competitions from the past. What you see here is 5 different wheelchairs. Some of them have tracks, some of them have small wheels, some of them have bigger wheels, and you see some of the apparatus they're trying to get over, just to give you a sense of what we're trying to accomplish. This is a slide of the 2024 competitors that were in the finals with us. I show these pictures as well to contrast them with what I'm going to show you about our design in a minute. Because these wheelchairs are kind of more, I would call, conventional in a sense. They have kind of small wheels, they're joystick driven. What you would kind of see in a power wheelchair in everyday life right now. They all, of course, have a bunch of things that everyday wheelchairs do not have today. Things like tracks that are underneath them that help you get up staircase, for instance, and robot arms. They all have robot arms attached to them. And I mention those things because we didn't have any of those. We did it completely differently. So let me just jump into how we think of wheelchair design and assistive technology design, what we call our kind of design ethos. I mentioned I was a Paralympic wheelchair athlete in wheelchair basketball. I use a manual wheelchair, so I think about accessibility and wheelchair innovation in manual wheelchair kind of terms. But also in terms of modular attachments, these are emerging products that are on the market right now that you attach to your wheelchair to do different things. And the easiest one is a power front end to turn your wheelchair into like a 3-wheel scooter. And the other thing we're really into in my lab and my life is off-road mobility. And I kind of gave you a hint of that at the beginning when I showed you those pictures of Vancouver and the beautiful parks around it. So that's kind of the background of where we come from. A bit more background. We mentioned the wheelchair basketball already. You know, when I play wheelchair basketball, I'm super maneuverable and I sit very low, very stable. These are things that are important in wheelchair sports. In everyday life, though, some other things are needed. Maybe going up and down, for instance. There's me working at a laboratory bench in a wheelchair I designed called the elevation wheelchair, which lets my seat go up and down. Again, things that are going to come into play when I tell you about our Cybathlon design. And some of the latest, most recent things we've done in my lab, 2 pictures on the left of me in a manual wheelchair, but with some very fancy wheels on it. These really powerful, fat-tired hub motors at the back and this front end on the front to turn my wheelchair into a 3-wheel all-terrain vehicle. You see me on the beach there. You see me in snow. It works quite well in those scenarios. The 2 pictures on the right are another innovation that we're trying to get to market called the swivel stone roll front wheel. It basically expands your wheelbase. It lengthens your wheelchair frame and it lets you get over obstacles a little bit easier in a manual wheelchair. So with that in mind, let's jump right into what we call the Beast. It was a fun nickname for the chair. It does mean something. In this case, it's BCIT, extending, articulating wheelchair for serious terrains. And I'll show you about all those things during the race. So what I'm going to do, there's 2 more pictures of our design. And I will point out too that it looks different from those other wheelchairs, right? Those power wheelchairs that are joystick driven. This one looks, there's a like a bicycle handle. That's how it's being driven with brake levers. There's big wheels instead of small wheels. In this case, 2 at the back and 1 at the front. We can imagine this one day being a manual wheelchair with these big wheels, powerful wheels being attached to a manual wheelchair frame in the future. But right now it was just all an integrated unit that was, purpose built to tackle this course. So I am going to now show you the final race and tell you what is happening during it. And we're going to go through all 10 tasks. And at the beginning is a maneuverability task. This is called the restaurant task. And every day in a wheelchair, I have to be able to get underneath a counter, a table, a desk. Right now I'm sitting at my desk. I have to be able to get under it in my wheelchair. Things that you need to do every day in a wheelchair. And you have to be very maneuverable, right? We have to get around obstacles, your furniture, people. And so that was one of the tasks that we had to do. So we couldn't make this really big, large, stable wheelchair that can climb stairs if it couldn't also do things as simple as navigating in your kitchen or getting under a table or a desk. So that task is completed now. There's going to be 10 of them, by the way. That was the first one. Now you see some articulation. You see my leg rests coming up. That is because they would get in the way of obstacles on the ground. The other thing that happened there you might not have noticed was I extended. The wheelchair got much, much longer. It has about 70 centimeters of length change that happens, and a whole lot of power and a whole lot of traction. And now it's going up a staircase and back down a staircase on the other side. And now that task is completed. And I'm going to now use my controls to get ready for the next task. Now I'm putting my legs back down. And I mentioned we need to manipulate objects in this event. And most competitors had a robot arm on their wheelchair. We had these leg rests that went up and down. And so we decided, what if we could use the leg rest as a part of a robot arm? So we put this claw on the end of a foot. And what we had to do in this task was lift a 1.5 liter bottle of water off the ground and put it on a table. This was a very fun design exercise. And we thought, can we use the leg and a servo motor and a claw to lift a bottle of water off the ground? And there you go, we did it in such a unique fashion compared to other people with their robot arms. The next task is this as a side slope. You have to demonstrate that you can drive your chair on a very steep side slope. It's a slope that's so steep I would tip over in my manual wheelchair. Right about here, I would tip over now, but in this case, this chair is much more stable than that. And in the end, a relatively simple task. Now that's passed, and on to the next one. And this one, now you see the leg rest coming up. And what I'm going to do now is also move the seat up. And if you watch closely, you'll see me rising up much, much higher. And this task was required to move 30 centimeters at least. And so I have to come up all the way to the top. I have to choose one of those blocks. I hit the yellow one. Now I have to come down 30 centimeters and demonstrate that I can go under that yellow one. And so now coming back down, I bring the leg rest back down, my seat back down all the way. And in the end, we had about 35 centimeters of seat height change, which was really quite a bit. It was very cool. The next task is called the crowd task. Imagine a cocktail party with high tables and people standing around having drinks and appetizers. Can you navigate that in your wheelchair? Can you not knock over people and run into people? And that was what that task was all about. In the end, it was quite simple for us. And now we're on to the most difficult task, the most exciting task of all of them. It's the curved staircase, which is much more difficult than a straight staircase. If you can imagine going around a curve with wheels, you got to make sure you don't tip over sideways. We were the only team to actually even attempt this task. And what you'll see me doing here is rocking back and forth, looking kind of unstable, but actually I'm very stable going up the staircase. And I don't really care too much about where I am. I'm just going to apply a lot of power and just make sure I get up there, because it's actually very stable going up. On the other hand, once I'm up, there I am now. I'm coming down. It's really skittish coming down, and I could very easily tip over sideways coming down. And so I'm going to be much more careful now and use the design of the wheelchair with the one wheel at the front to turn it quite sideways and kind of try to square up every time I go down a tread. There you see me moving sideways, kind of pivoting. Now my back wheels are squared up again. Now I'm going to do it again, and I'm on the ground and safe, and I pass the task. And you can see the engineers, my teammates, with kind of size of relief. That's a very cool task to pass. The next one, the other leg goes up and down, kind of like a robot arm as well. And we have a really fancy gizmo on the end of this. This is to open a door. So in this case, we have to use the doorknob to be able to twist it open, pull it back. I'm going to use the front wheel to knock the door open a bit further so I can get through it. And then to complete this task, I have to turn around and close the door. So it's not over yet, and I can't cross that white line until the door is closed, otherwise I would fail the task. So I'm going to get lined up, and I'm going to use another little gizmo on my right leg. I think of this one as Army jets, Air Force jets refueling in midair. You have to kind of get it centered and get it lined up, and then put the gizmo over top of the door lever to grab it with this 3D printed object. And I pull it back, and behold, the door closes, and this gizmo snaps off and kind of goes back into place, and the door is now done. And we're on to the ninth task. We're almost done now. I got to get the leg rest up again on the other side. This one is kind of the rocky road task, which is just a bunch of rough obstacles to think about, roots or rocks on a trail, like that Stanley Park that I showed you at the beginning. And our device handles this quite easily. This was, by this time, we know we're going to finish the course. Everything is fairly simple for our device now. And the final one is an 8-inch obstacle we have to get over. In Europe, they call that a door threshold. In North America, that's a significant obstacle. And there we go. We passed it. We got through. We won the race. And you can see everybody kind of high-fiving and congratulating everyone. And it was super exciting. And that's it. That's my talk. And I'm going to end it there and move on to questions. And I hope you have a lot of questions. I really enjoyed showing you that.
Very exciting, Jaimie. Thank you. You mentioned the Beast was purpose designed for the competition, and you can see some of the tools and even the side of the chair you put them on making sense for this course. Where do you see the innovations used to develop Beast being integrated into everyday chairs?
It's a great question, and it's a bit tricky to know. We've been involved with commercialization efforts. It's very difficult. And making an innovation that works in the lab is a lot different from making a product that has a market, that gets funded, that people can actually, buy and use. But that being said, there's two that come to mind, and one of them is the rear wheels, and the hint is the pictures I showed at the beginning with me on the beach or me in snow. We know that's a very useful configuration. We're starting to see some products in Europe now that are getting into that space, realizing that we use emerging e-bike technologies, which are relatively inexpensive. Batteries are getting cheaper all the time. We might be able to come up with nice attachments, or you swap out your manual wheels and put on these big, powerful motors with big fat tires to tackle things like beaches and trails and that sort of thing. So that's one area. And the other area is that front end. Again, that's another set of products that is on the market. Ours is quite a bit different. We had to make ours completely drivable by a joystick or by any other modality because of the nature of the competition. Let me just, if I jump back right to the very beginning of this talk, not quite the beginning, but sorry, right here. I have a kind of a similar setup, right? You see this bicycle handle with my hands are on it, and I'm driving it like a mountain bike with brake levers. We weren't allowed to do that during the Cybathlon because I'm using my muscles to steer. What we designed though was this front end that was kind of steer by wire, if you know that phrase. There was no mechanical linkage between me moving my arms and the wheel moving. It was all done electronically and with motors. So that's another area that we think could be commercialized, is a attachable device like this, but then with someone that isn't as strong as me, that doesn't have the dexterity I have, could we map that to then a joystick or some other control modality?
That's awesome. Very interesting. And you've got some really cool chairs to showcase just for your everyday life. We've got two kind of connected questions. somebody noted that the obstacle course at the Cybathlon was reminiscent of Ninja Warrior and some of the athletes going through those obstacles, and wondering if this video or videos from the competition were available on YouTube to be able to share and sort of put it on blast everywhere. And a similar question with how do we increase knowledge about the type of innovation and research going into the beast and other such products.
So this competition was very well filmed. There is all sorts of videos, and I showed you the final race. You can actually find one of our qualification runs, for instance, online. And so Cybathlon, the organizers of the competition, do have a YouTube channel. They have a website you can go on to, and I encourage you to do that bit, because the other events were really cool as well. The technologies that we saw there, we saw robot dogs with arms walking around and doing tasks, exoskeletons walking. The prosthetics we saw there was super exciting. So it's all available online. So it's fairly easy search. If you just search Cybathlon, it'll all come up. At the same time, if you search BCIT and my last name, you will come up with a bunch of our projects. We have quite a bit online about it as well. But you're absolutely right. A lot of these things aren't well known, not well advertised. And one of the reasons we went there was to think about that and to do that, to raise awareness, right, about the possibilities. Some of the, that beast is not going to be commercialized on its own. You can't buy that thing. You'll never will be able to buy that. Hopefully some things will spin off of it, but it also raises the possibilities of what we can do with engineering, innovation, and technology, and working together with people with disabilities.
Great. Yeah, we've had some comments in the chat of sort of feeling the challenge and the pain associated with maneuvering chairs around hilly or obstacle laden environments. So I think there's a lot of appreciation for the research you're doing.
Thank you. And it's, I'm really lucky. I get a really cool job. I get to come in and play with our fabrication tools and design tools and our team, and we get to come up with some pretty crazy things sometimes. So love my job.
Fantastic. We've got a question that asked about whether or not any of your innovations are things that might help able-bodied people in terms of a crossover market or to maximize potentially product viability.
Well, that's a great question. I think of the smartphone as an example of that. When I had colleagues, 20 years ago working in controls, trying to make products or devices that control things for people with high-level disabilities, and using various devices to do that with. And then all of a sudden the smartphone comes around, the iPhone comes around, and Android phones. Now you have this platform that's really cheap and really well supported by millions of developers and engineers and companies. So now things you can do with assistive technology with a smartphone is so much more than we could do 20 years ago. I think e-bikes in the same way, electric cars as well for that matter, even self-driving cars, that technology that's emerging. We have a device here now with a LiDAR on it, which a piece of technology that a self-driving car would use. We're going to see, I think, a lot of these things start to trickle down into assistive technology, into the wheelchair space. And we see it right now. We're seeing many more products coming on the market that are just using e-bike motors, electric bike motors now, and batteries. And actually, most of the parts on our device were from e-bikes. We have 3 different e-bike motors. We have the controllers, the brains of it, the throttles, the brakes, all these sort of things are all coming from the e-bikes now, and certainly the batteries. So that's where things are kind of converging, I think, which is really exciting.
Very exciting. Well, we are at time, so I wanted to thank you again, Jaimie, for giving this presentation, and let you close out with the last 45, 60 seconds we've got here.
Well, thank you for having us here. It was I've never spoken to a group like this. I'm usually talking to engineers or occupational therapists. So it was really nice to have this other kind of audience. And it was a fun week, and you guys have done a great job. Thank you for letting us share our story.